And we all know, I mean, let's get down to it. We all know that women are at the heart of conservation and climate change movement here in the US and the world over. And so it's, for centuries, women have been at the forefront. And, from people like Rachel Carson, who kind of forged the way with her Silent Spring, and then all the way up until now, Gina McCarthy, who is leading the force at the Environmental Protection Agency and making climate action a top priority for that agency. And so in recognizing that women have been such a centralizing force for environmental change, we decided that in honor of Women's History Month, NWF would honor female heroes of conservation past and present. And so that's what brings us here today. And basically tonight, we have decided that our first award recipient would be Maggie Fox. And what better person to award this first celebration than Maggie Fox? And, I think Maggie's been an inspiration for all of us over the years, myself included. And it was really cool. We were having people RSVP for this event, and people were giving us all these little anecdotes and little stories about Maggie, and so excited that we were going to be honoring her. And there were such cool words like inspiration and hero and my idol, and Maggie has touched so many of us with the work that she's done. And I can speak personally for how Maggie's kind of affected me over the years. I worked for the last few years before coming to the National Wildlife Federation for the United Nations, working with small island developing states, helping them adapt to climate change. So I was in Fiji, the Maldives, the Seychelles, all of these countries that are facing the impacts of climate change so acutely and so directly. We're talking communities that are relocating to higher ground right now, and we're talking about communities that are literally going underwater. And, it was so crazy to be living in, these places and working with the local people and thinking, God, there's so little movement happening in the US on this stuff while we're sinking, while these other countries are being so acutely affected. And it was so heartening to me to, as I was, sitting in Fiji working with the people there, to hear that the Climate Reality Project is so pervasive that it's hit all of these countries. And we saw these, climate leaders and people talking about Climate Reality Project and feeling hope that wasn't present in kind of the political landscape. And so it was just so inspirational for me to see how pervasive the work that has been done by the Climate Reality Project has been and how far it's gotten around the globe. And so that's a huge testament to the work that Maggie has done alongside with Vice President Al Gore. And so it's just incredible. And so before I bring Maggie up here, though, I just want to talk about some of the other things that she has done before coming to Climate Reality Project. And Maggie began her career as a community organizer on the Navajo and Hopi reservations of Arizona and New Mexico. And then a lot of us knew Maggie when she worked for the Sierra Club for over 20 years in very senior leadership positions. Maggie also worked for Outward Bound for a long time. And I think, perhaps is best known now for her work with the Climate Reality Project and just training thousands of climate leaders in over 100 countries and using cutting-edge social media tools and other outreach tools to really expand the reach worldwide. And so it's just such an incredible honor to be here tonight to present Maggie with our first annual Women in Conservation Award. So thank you so much, Maggie. So, and you have to smile for So we have, oh boy, still getting pictures.
David is learning.
Yeah. So we have this plaque for you, Maggie, and then we also have your Ranger Rick stuffed animal that is.
I love Ranger Rick.
that is such an important accompaniment to your award.
I got it for the kids, but I loved it when they were growing up. Thank you, Claire. That was very good. There is really never enough recognition of the role that women play as leaders across the globe, whether it's in elected office, in conservation, in healthcare, you name the field. There's really never enough recognition for what women are doing around the world. So I'm all in. It's not just about conservation. I'm all in about recognizing women anytime and anywhere. Women's leadership is not always about elected office. It's a particular kind of leadership, and we are all very grateful for any woman and any man who puts themselves into that world, particularly in the 21st century. But it's really women's leadership across the board that I am really proud and excited to be a part of this endeavor, and honored that I would even be considered to do that. Women's voices have, according to Eleanor Roosevelt, whether subtly or ferociously, shaped our planet since the beginning of time. But there have been extraordinarily odd forces, which we won't discuss tonight, that have kept those voices from being recognized appropriately for their impact on history. And that is so old. It's so done. It's so necessarily the past that any opportunity to do this is a net positive. The problems and challenges and opportunities of the 21st century require women and their leadership, require women to step forward in ways beyond which they have been comfortable in the past, and move themselves, their communities, our country, and the world to a different place. The notion is that women have not, our voices have not led sufficiently to shift the dialogue the way it actually has to shift in order for us to take on the challenges of the 21st century. This moment and this challenge is really a very unique one in human history. And it requires something very different of us. The work keeps growing and changing, and I've learned so much working with all of you over the years. It has been an extraordinary journey that I cannot begin to calculate the value of for me. How important it is for us to pause and take stock of where we've been and what we need to do next. We've actually done really great work, both in this community, in this state, in this country, and around the world. And I'm incredibly proud of it. But the work going forward really does need to change. And we need to change in order to do different work. One of the most extraordinary gifts that I was given when Mark decided to run for office in 1996 was that I, as many of you know, have an organizer gene. People know how to pack, I don't. People know how to organize, I love it. People know how to cook, I can. My daughter's got the gene. But even with the organizer gene, I wasn't really aware until I went door to door with Mark, thousands of doors for his first State House race in 1996, that the environmental movement wasn't communicating the least bit effectively with people. We had beautiful language, extraordinary photos, and hearts bursting with love for wild places. But our language was impenetrable to most of the people that we needed to reach. Not because we meant it to be, but because we were unaware that how we spoke was tribal. And we communicated beautifully with each other, but we really weren't reaching very many other people. That was an enormous gift, one I've tried very hard to learn from over and over again over the years. In 2009, right after the president was sworn in, because we all believed then, as it seemed real, that we were going to actually pass climate legislation. The moment had arrived. And here we are, these years later, and it's further away than it has ever been. What's that about? I don't want to put a damper on this conversation, but the truth will out. And the reality of where we are is important to absorb in order to move forward for all of us. So leading that effort, it was an incredible opportunity to bring together the entire environmental movement with the help of a lot of other individual organizations and people, but to expand it to a table of over 64 organizations who are actually working on moving climate legislation. Never had that been done. Never had national legislation been seen as truly a campaign. Understanding that we were communicating with people as a campaign and not as an individual vote on a single thing in either the House or the Senate or the State House or in front of county commissioners. It was an enormous step forward, and yet it stalled dead. Why? Well, there are 1,000 reasons, and they're not really what we are here about tonight. The most important lesson for me was the unwillingness of everyone involved because of the pain of losing to assess what we had done well and what we had not. That's really never been done. And so I would say to you, every single person in this room, man, woman, young person, child, don't ever do that. That is utter foolishness, and it's based on, I think, two things that we must overcome. One, fear that me or my organization didn't quite measure up in the true communication or the true depth of our production or commitment will be outed. Well, you think it isn't anyway? And two, broken hearts. Like, ouch. We care so much. We poured so much of ourselves into it. How dare we go back and visit that? It's so painful. But that pain, that truth, that recognition that the work was really quite magnificent, and it ran into enormous headwinds that must be understood because they won't disappear just because we want them to. They are real, and they have only grown stronger in the years since. We named the organization the Climate Reality Project after that experience because the reality of climate was still eluding us, both as individuals, as organizations, as a movement, as a country, and as a world. It's not so much eluding us as a world anymore. As Claire said, there are people, countries, individuals who are living the reality of it every day in ways that we are really unable to comprehend because we've never seen that kind of challenge. We saw a little piece of it in the floods in northern Colorado a year and a half ago. What is this? How did this, what is this? What is this? People's lives changed forever, but in our economic reality, those changes were small compared to the way they are in the rest of the world. And so I would say it's really important to be excited about the 21st century and excited to reinvest, but only once you pause and look at what you've been doing and what needs to change and grow. So for these young, new leaders in the conservation movement, hurrah. Bring all of your irreverence, your need for change, your belief that there is nothing going to stop you, because it won't if you don't let it. Don't think that the wonderful experiences of the past and the victories that we have are over. They're not. They're shaping themselves into different things. There's whole new victories out there. I don't think they're going to look like they used to. The 50th anniversary of the Wilderness Act occurred in 2014, and I stepped off the campaign trail without permission to go to the law school because I couldn't not take that day, one couple of hours, to just think about that. And I said something that day that came from my heart that I really do believe, and that I think I've learned later than I would like to have learned. And that is that there really is no conservation organization in the world that should not be working on climate change today. It defines our lives and the world in every way we can understand. So whether it is explicit or implicit, it must be part of your work. To think that any single organization without partnering with many others like you did tonight is going to make a difference is fanciful. Dream on. Ain't happening. Because whatever progress you make, and you will, get a mailing out, find a group of people, put together an event, 1,000 different examples, you have to amplify it. You have to do it again. You have to get that commitment that you brought and seduced into the room, and you've got to hold it. And that takes relentless cooperation with your partners. Endless and relentless. And it must be part of your work plans. There's not donors out there who will reward you for doing that. And you must teach them that that is wrong, that you must work together. You need the partnerships, you need the relationships, you need each other really badly. And you must do that. The third is you need women leading these organizations. And you need women running them and in senior positions. Women make decisions differently than men. There's a study out that I was sharing with Vicki. She'll probably think, no, Maggie, don't talk about this. But she's learned the hard way I do that anyhow. About what women do under stress versus men. It was a great study. And I thought the way they created stress was pretty remarkable. Simple. And simple is brilliant, usually. Which is they put both hands in water that grew hot very quickly without permission to take their hands out, and started throwing at them individual challenges of the workplace that they had to respond to and figure out what they needed to do. Just like a day in anyone's office, but with your hands in hot water simulating the stress that's coming from a lot of other situations. Men accelerated the decision making, started reaching out and making decisions faster, more aggressively, and without checking, excluding people from decision making, and moving very fast. Women slowed it down, brought more people in, managed the stress in their bodies, and led from a very different place. This is not anecdote. This is science. Women need to be in leadership positions, not to displace men, but to share those roles in a much more significant way in the 21st century. The next thing I think it's really important is a bit of heresy in an odd way, and that is really that there's no conservation organization in the world that shouldn't have programs for children. I have no opinion about what they're like because they grow out of the core of what that organization is trying to do. But the 21st century demands children who are connected to the natural world. We were driving on the interstate, and occasionally those moments come for all of us every day where you realize this crazy world we live in. And it's been a joy to be a little unhooked from that rapid life over the last few months. A complete joy. We really need to do this. And there are thousands of organizations that have no program for children. That means those organizations are incomplete in their mission. And they need to partner with, create. That's for them to decide. But every single organization that's looking at conservation and environmental values in the 21st century should be reaching out to children every single day. The programs that are out there are wonderful, but they are small, and they are rarely amplified in any significant way. So when I spoke at the 50th anniversary of Wilderness, I said the charge of wilderness in the 21st century is to recognize that a wilderness designation through federal legislation is probably one of the most unimportant things you could do. You spend a huge amount of time fighting a door when there are 1,000 other ways to bring people into believing and connecting personally with the power of those wild places. You need to be thinking about how to be creative about that and not think that the only way to do this is through federal legislation. That's not about being disrespectful of the law. I love the law. And I love everything about those who give of themselves for elected office. But to think that that's the path of the 21st century is not stopping and listening to what's happening. And the last thing I would say, lesson-wise, is that these guys have heard me say this. This work is full of joy. Endless, boundless joy. Climate change is fierce. As the vernacular goes, it's a BFD. And every day you can wake up with that thing on the back of your neck and get a little cattywampus. I have. And sometimes get cattywampus enough that you don't unhook from that lopsided, fierce fear. This planet precedes us. It will succeed us. Eleanor Roosevelt is one of my true heroes, heroines. She has endless quotes that are magnificent. You could just hit the internet. They're amazing. But the one that has spoken to me for many years, and I won't have it just right, it's perhaps my paraphrase, but she said the greatest privilege of her life was to have meaningful work. Meaningful in that it took all of her. Her heart, her soul, her time, her love. We all have meaningful work. And when one has meaningful work, then one must be joyous. Whether or not we are moving at the rate and the pace that we need to by our own education and estimation, this is troubling. Sometimes very troubling. But the joy that we ignite in ourselves is what captures people, not the threat. So my last admonition is there's a lot of climate science. There's a lot of biological science, physical science, physics, chemistry. But I think the 21st century demands that we pay attention to social science. What it takes to move us as human beings. And unfortunately, most of our advocacy isn't doing that. So I think it's not unimportant to pause and remember who we are as human beings and what it takes us to move forward. And that is vision, possibility, hope, and standing up relentlessly to lies and negativity, but in a way that leads us forward. Thank you so very much.